I watch a lot of your videos. You had one recently about Brandon Aiyuk. And I know, it's like there's a lot of Niner fans that are just exhausted by the Aiyuk discussion, the Deebo discussion, the JJ discussion, the wide receiver discussion. I get that. But your video was different than some of the other videos. You actually kind of cited a source as saying that the 49ers don't want to move Aiyuk and won't move Aiyuk. And am I misstating that? Well, give me for those who did not see the Chase Senior Chat Sport video this week on Aiyuk, or maybe you did multiples, but kind of fill in the blanks on where I kind of led you there.
Yeah. So at the NFL Combine a couple of weeks ago in Indianapolis, it's an opportunity when you go to something like that. It's basically a football convention where you can talk to all types of people all across the NFL, from coaches to assistants to coordinators to media members to people who are involved in these NFL operations. And it's a really cool opportunity, especially for somebody like me who's a little bit younger in this industry, to network a little bit, to get my face and my name out there, but also to gather some intel and information from a lot of sources. So then I was interacting with somebody and I got some information from a source close to the organization and John Lynch. And the report that I had was the 49ers don't want to move Brandon Aiyuk. They want him to be a part of the future core of this organization. And then John Lynch had his first official press conference of the offseason. He said, we want Brandon Aiyuk to be a member of this organization for a really long time. Look at our track record. So then I'm like, okay, let's think about the Niners' track record here. In consecutive off seasons, what has happened with some of their homegrown superstar level players? It all started in 2020 with this regime. They signed George Kittle to the richest contract ever for a tight end. The following offseason, they gave Fred Warner the most money for any off-ball linebacker in the NFL at the time. In the 2022 offseason, they made Deebo Samuel the 7th highest paid wide receiver in football on a deal that pays him about $24 million per year. And then last year with Nick Bosa, they made him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history on an average annual value of $34 million. So the Niners have this track record of taking care of their homegrown players that they invest in the draft, invest their time and energy into developing, and then they take care of those players because they understand they embody what the Niners are all about. Working hard, level of dedication, loving ball, intensity, physicality, passion. And all of those players exude all of that. Brandon Aiyuk does as well. So that's part of the report. And then I was told, and this is pretty interesting here, that Brandon Aiyuk's agent is best friends with John Lynch. John Lynch was the best man at his wedding. And John Lynch was one of his first clients, one of his big first clients as an agent. And that agent was at John Lynch's Hall of Fame speech and celebration in Canton, Ohio. And that source told me that there's no way that the 49ers are going to want to move off of Brandon Aiyuk. Now, context is important and things change. Did the Niners then envision the wide receiver market being reset by the likes of Calvin Ridley, who got $23 million per year on that deal from the Tennessee Titans? I don't think anybody saw that coming. Right. And that kind of resets the market in a way where Aiyuk and his camp now have the right to go to the negotiating table and say, not only do we want more than Calvin Ridley because Brandon Aiyuk is the better, younger, more productive player, but look at what Aiyuk has done in the last 2 years as compared to Deebo Samuel, who's making $24 million per year. We want more than Deebo Samuel because Aiyuk has been the better wide receiver than Deebo. So the asking price now might start at $25 million per year. And before I throw it back to you, look at the numbers the last 2 years between Aiyuk and Deebo. And it's amazing to me that people who watch this football team will say that Deebo is a better wide receiver than Aiyuk. It's simply not true in my opinion. Aiyuk the last 2 years, Deebo the last 2 years. And Aiyuk's the younger player, less injured, more available, more productive. 33 games for Aiyuk, 28 games for Deebo. 219 targets for Aiyuk, 183 for Deebo. 153 catches for Aiyuk, 116 for Deebo. 2,357 receiving yards for Aiyuk, 1,524 for Deebo. That's 800 more yards for Aiyuk the last 2 years through the air than Deebo Samuel. Yards per catch, 15.4 for Deebo, or for Aiyuk, 13.1 for Deebo. Deebo, to his credit, has 17 total touchdowns, and Aiyuk has 15 total touchdowns. And in a way, Deebo is so special with his ability to be a game breaker, a game changer. He's a threat to take it to the crib anytime he gets his hands on the football. So as a weapon, he might be a little bit better or a little bit more explosive than Brandon Aiyuk. Here's the problem, though. The wide receiver market has taken off. And as a wide receiver, Brandon Aiyuk has been better. Deebo might help you as a running back from time to time, and you can use him as that Swiss Army knife, but he's being paid as the 7th highest paid wide receiver in the game at $23 million per year. So that's where this interesting conversation comes about of, are the Niners willing to pay Aiyuk 25 mil plus? And with that, are they going to be able to afford 2 wide receivers who are both making combined, let's call it about $50 million when there are financial constraints elsewhere on this roster? And that's why I brought up the conversation of, if the Niners have to keep one, trade one, I would keep Aiyuk over Deebo. Now, I think for 2024, there's a chance and a good chance they could have both those players. But after next year, if there's only one remaining on this team, and if it's Aiyuk, doesn't surprise me at all.
There's a lot there. Okay. Couple things. Do you believe that the 49ers are committed to paying Aiyuk whatever the market bears? Or do you think that they are saying what they want to say and we're going to see a gigantic 180 pivot here in the weeks ahead as this thing starts to kind of, reveal itself? Because my son tweeted out the other day that the Niner wide receiver room currently is $50.8 million, second most in the NFL. If the Niners extend Aiyuk, assuming roughly $24 million as an average annual value, their wide receiver room would cost $60.7 million, which would be the most expensive wide receiver room in the NFL by over $9 million. The Niners could be paying their wide receivers and tight ends $76 million, which would be $13 million more than any other team in the NFL. So they can do this because Purdy only makes about $1 million.
Yep.
But that extension's coming in next year. And I'm just, are we going to see them go exorbitant cost at wide receiver this year and then correct this thing next year somehow, some way? Or there's all, Matt Invader 49ers says Matt Barrows on KMBR reported yesterday afternoon that the Niners are actively shopping Aiyuk. The report that I read was that that Pittsburgh and New England are interested, and we know Jacksonville's interested, and the Niners will shop him through the end of the first round. And then if they don't get what they want, they'll shut it down and they won't shop him. What do you make of all of this? I mean, are the Niners, you think Lynch just wants to be on the record of saying, hey, we want this player, and then just let Aiyuk say, hey, man, I want $35 million or I want X number of dollars guaranteed, and then just say to the Niner fans, hey, we didn't want to move him. We love him. We told you we loved him. We meant it, but the markets got out of control and we had no other choice. We had to move him. How do you think this thing's actually going to play out?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors here. I think the Niners ideally want to keep Brandon Aiyuk, as I reported. But again, things have changed since the NFL Combine with the wide receiver market basically being reset by Calvin Ridley. Also, we don't know what the asking price is for Aiyuk. I think it starts at $25 million for the reasons that I mentioned. He could ask for more. And at that point, Do you just think that he's too expensive to keep? Now, some people don't think he's a number one. I disagree. Footwork, route running, goal line to goal line threat, contested catch guy, deep ball accuracy from Brock Purdy to him was elite this past year, and he has that speed to take the top off of the defense. He has every single route to his route tree. And whereas a player like Tyreek Hill can't really be utilized in the red zone outside of jet sweeps and bubble screens, Aiyuk can be used because as we saw on that play, unfortunately, when Chris Jones broke through the line of scrimmage, the route that he ran on L'Jarius Sneed in the red zone was dirty on that little turnaround route in which he was able to spring free. So you can utilize him in a variety of ways. You're not going to use him in the backfield like Deebo, which is what makes Deebo special. You can't really hit him with the bubble screen like Deebo, where Deebo can make a couple of guys miss, run through your chest, and then take it to the house. They're different players for sure. But if the Niners think that Aiyuk is too expensive, now is the time to move him this offseason. This wide receiver class is stacked. It's loaded. And we're coming to a point where every year now, because these young high school players are seeing wide receivers get paid, not only just with average annual value, but years. They have longevity to their careers. I'm going to play wide receiver compared to running back because that's a better position for me to play at. And these athletes who are coming up in the high school and college ranks are so talented. And there's all these 7-on-7s that are happening. These college programs are so good with their coaching staffs. There are all these personal trainers where the drafts now are littered with wide receivers year in, year out who can be plug and play guys. We've seen it with Jamar Chase. We've seen it with Jordan Addison. We've seen it with Justin Jefferson. Brandon Aiyuk, even as a rookie in that COVID year in which there were no preseason games, limited training camp practices, was able to be an impact player year one. And I thought it was pretty telling that at the combine, the Niners had all of these formal meetings with the likes of Xavier Worthy and Xavier Legette and Troy Franklin and Brian Thomas, who I know you're really high on. Yeah. So if Aiyuk is too expensive and you don't envision him being a part of your future because that price tag is too exorbitant, now's the time to move him in the lead up to the draft or on draft night for two reasons. You can draft his replacement in the first round, and I don't think your offense takes much of a step back. Obviously, there's going to be a learning curve with a guy like Kyle Shanahan, who played wide receiver at Texas, who has been hard on wide receivers. We've seen that plenty before. Dante Pettis, Brandon Aiyuk in the doghouse. But if you get that wide receiver with the first-round pick that you get back from a Pittsburgh, a Jacksonville, another team, you can then draft his replacement. And then if you hold on to your own selection at number 31, that's where you can go right tackle, offensive guard, a right tackle now and a left tackle in the future that can take over for Trent Williams at some point. I think all of these things are kind of being discussed for San Francisco right now, and they all make total sense to me, and I think they're viable reasons.
Okay, assuming that they want to do a Kinlaw Buckner deal again, where they moved Buckner and then they drafted Buckner's replacement with Kinlaw in the pick that they made. And a lot of Niner fans are like, no, don't do that. It didn't work out. But assuming they wanted to do the same kind of move where they traded Aiyuk, got a mid-first round pick, and then got a receiver to replace him and saved all that money. Harrison is going top 5. Malik Neighbors, top 10. Rome Odunze, let's say top 15.
10.
Yeah, maybe top 10. I'm not a Rome Odunze fan, but whatever. So that means that the Niners are going to be staring at this group of receivers. Ladd McConkey, who just ran in the 4.3s, but only has 2 career touchdowns, or I believe had 2 touchdowns this year. Brian Thomas from LSU had 17 touchdowns this year. Troy Franklin from Oregon, who ran exceptionally well, but he only weighs 175 pounds. Adonai Mitchell from Texas, who's 6'3", 190, ran in the 4.3s. Xavier Worthy, who's 6'1", only about 165 pounds, but ran in the 4.2s. Keon Coleman from Florida State, who's got a gigantic catch radius. Ricky Pearsall from Florida. Roman Wilson from Michigan. Devontae Walker from Carolina, who kind of drops the ball a bit. And then Xavier Legette from South Carolina, who also runs in the 4.3s at 230 pounds. Of that group, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 10 wide receivers. Who do you think they like? Who do you like?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what you're looking for. Brian Thomas is a little bit larger, and I think he's an all-around complete wide receiver. Lad McConkey is more of a slot guy who reminds me a little bit of Cooper Kupp because he's got great route running, but he's a little bit shorter. Xavier Legette, I think that you can get in the second round. He brings you the size and stature of a Deebo Samuel, where I think he's like 6'2", 220, and he ran really well. Xavier Worthy, to me, he said at the combine that he idolized Deshaun Jackson growing up. They're very similar players. Deshaun Jackson, cow guy, was a burner, one of the most explosive wide receivers of all time. As far as touchdowns of 50-plus yards, he's right up there with Jerry Rice for the most ever. And Xavier Worthy ran a 4.21, but at 167 pounds. The guy that I like who's kind of falling under the radar is actually Xavier Worthy's teammate, Adonai Mitchell. I think he's a terrific player. I think he's going to be a better pro than Xavier Worthy. He's bigger. He's more of a well-rounded wide receiver as compared to just, I don't want to call Xavier Worthy a gadget guy. Deshaun Jackson was not a gadget guy, but because he was slighter and tinier and a little bit shorter, but extremely fast, he was never really truly a number one wide receiver. When I look at a number one wide receiver, I want size, speed, hands, the full package. I think AD Mitchell has the full package, and he ran so well. And I think this is always like important to kind of separate and compare, right? Like Xavier Worthy ran a 4.21 40-yard dash at 167 pounds, I think. AD Mitchell at 6'2", 205, more than 30 pounds heavier, ran a 4.34 40-yard dash. And I think longevity-wise, he holds up because he's a little bit bigger, has more to his route tree, a little bit more of a physical wide receiver. Troy Franklin is kind of in that mold as well. So there are a bunch of different wide receivers that you could look at in round one who are different prototypes, but in round two, you could get a Legette. You could get a guy like Keon Coleman, who was the slowest wide receiver as far as the 40-yard dash at 4.6. But if you want a contested catch, 50-50 physical wide receiver who showed up against some upper echelon competition, who ran a slow 40, but the fastest gauntlet, which more measures football speed, you could go with the guy like that in round two or round three. Or the Western Kentucky kid is also
Malachi
really
Corley.
good.
Yeah.
He's good. Ricky Pearsall out of Florida is a really solid player. So I think what I like here for the Niners, if they do trade away Brandon Aiyuk, it's the different options that you can go. Let's say that you get a pick in the 20s or the teens if you trade Aiyuk away. You could go edge, Chop Robinson. You could go defensive tackle there if you wanted to. You could go offensive line. You could go wide receiver. And whatever position that you don't go there, I still think you get a really solid player in the second round. And if you don't go wide out in round one and you go, let's say, offensive line edge or defensive tackle edge, you could get a really solid wide receiver in that second round because this class is so deep. And I still think that player could be an impact guy year one. Now, is he going to be to the likes of Aiyuk and have that continuity that he had with Brock Purdy? No, but in this offense, it's always going to be a run-centric offense. You still have Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, that rookie, and maybe Jawan Jennings is more a part of the receiving game.
Mitchell and Ness's Larry, go back and watch your video 3 weeks ago with Jesse and the coach. That episode made sense. You said it takes time for wide receivers to learn the system. There is no draft of plug-and-play wide receivers. I actually think that that's why there's a market for Aiyuk, is that's kind of the prevailing wisdom around the sport, is that it's really hard to find the plug and play wide receiver. Most of them take a year or two to adapt because there's so much nuance to, getting in and out of breaks and doing it efficiently. And the pro offense, there's so many more variables. And it oftentimes takes a transition. For every Randy Moss who hit the ground running, there's like 25 receivers that take a year to kind of, ease into it. Jerry Rice was in that group as well. So I hear what Mitchell and Ness is saying. A lot of comments here also about Legette. He says Legette or Brandon Rice That guy wants that. 187 says Leggett is a dog. Leggett did run in the 4.3s. It's a tough call because they've got a cap situation. They've got if you said like they're working out Malachi Corley, do you
Yeah.
think there's any market for Deebo, or is it so punitive to trade him pre June 1 that they're not even gonna even go down that road entertaining those deals?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've seen a lot of Malachi Corley, Deebo Samuel comps. The Deebo contract numbers, I'm just pulling them up real quick as far as a trade here, because if he were to be traded pre June 1, the dead money is $21.7 million, $6.9 million in cap savings in 2024. In 2025, $15 million in dead money, $9.1 million in cap savings. If you were to be traded post June 1, conversation changes. It's $6.6 million in dead money, $22 million in cap savings. In 2025, $6.6 million in dead money, $17.5 million in cap savings. So it would have to be a post June 1 trade. And this isn't something that you can kind of finesse and finagle like Eric Armstead, because that was a release. You can have that as that post June 1 type of designation, and you can't use that money until a little bit later. I don't think that you can do the same for a trade. I think it would have to be post June 1, which would then be interesting because the Niners, let's say they drafted a wide receiver early, a Corley, something who's similar to Deebo, even a similar game to Brandon Aiyuk at the end of April. Then we're kind of waiting, and all of this trade speculation is going to happen. Well, hold on. They use premium draft capital on a wide receiver here. That means that they're probably going to move one post June 1. Who is that player going to be? And that's going to lead to a lot of fascinating conversations.